And the next session is all about building a brand. And to me, and as I've hopefully already demonstrated, a brand is far more than that little logo that you see on a bit of packaging, or the little logo that you see on a business card, or on a bus advert or whatever. To me, and this is especially prevalent in a service business, it's the personification of that business. It's the personality. It's how you want your business to be portrayed and perceived to the outside world. It can be the source of a promise. It can be the source of trust. So a lot of the brands that we buy routinely, we do because of trust. If we look at hotels, for instance, I'm a particular fan of, whenever I go away, particularly for business, I always want to stay in a Hilton. Why? Because I trust their brand. I know that pretty much one Hilton is pretty much the same as another Hilton. So the reason I know that is because of the brand that they've created, the service that they've created, the look and feel of those hotels. So I know pretty much whichever one I go to will always be the same. So to me, the Hilton brand is the source of a trust mark. And we can look at other hotels in the way that Lenny Henry is trying to create them with, is it Travelodge? Whichever one that is, they're trying to do the same trust mark. It's a set of associations that can enhance a product or service, or can detract from a product or service. This is when brands go bad. And believe it or not, and actually, again, for those that fancy doing the old-fashioned thing and reading a book, there is a wonderful book by a chap called Matt Haig, H-A-I-G, and it's the 100 Worst Brand Mistakes. And it's wonderful to read. It's wonderful to read because you can see that the big multinational businesses really do mess up at points. And there are some great examples. McDonald's being one in a few different cases. They tried to introduce something called Dasani water that completely failed. Coca-Cola, very famous case of brand marketing with new Coca-Cola back in the late 70s, early 80s. They were losing competition to Pepsi, so they tried to rebrand the taste, rebrand the packaging, and they created something called New Coca-Cola. It fell really, really badly, and some people in the market were tending to think that Coca-Cola Life. Have you seen the new Coca-Cola they brought out, the one with a green label on it? The Coca-Cola Life will go down the same brand failures. There's one about Harley Davidson, and I honestly swear this is a true story, that Harley Davidson introduced a shampoo. Harley Davidson shampoo. So women that liked Harley Davidson could have their hair smell like Harley Davidson motorbikes, all oily and greasy. Because of course that's a wonderful product association for shampoos. So even the biggest businesses can create a brand that detracts from its actual products. But we can also do one that enhances our products. Look at the onset of Superdry clothing, for instance. A wonderful success story in what was a horrific recession, and a horrific recession particularly for retail. They were the fastest growing retailer of a long, long time, Superdry. It's the main source of an emotional connection. Think of, again, for those of you who remember, we'll have a particular positive emotional association to Lucozade. And this is for those that are particularly perhaps older than 35. You'll have an emotional connection to Lucozade because, who's going to be brave enough to...
You used to have it when you were 4.
Thank you, yes. I remember quite vividly as a child, my mother used to nip down to, not the supermarket, not the corner shop, the chemist, to buy this orange bottle of Lucozade with a foil top whenever I was poorly. It's now one of the, in fact, it is now the #1 sports drink in the world. Now that is a brand change. So that's a wonderful story of how they have evolved the product and evolved the brand to keep up with modern times. But even so, things like, Ovaltine, Hovis, they have wonderful emotional, historical, authentic heritage connections with us in terms of their brands. And then the final one, is it something that drives the design of the total customer experience? So is the brand something that's going to play a part in how we experience the product or service? A product is something that is made in a factory. I love this quote. A product is something that's made in a factory. A brand is something that is built up of trust and relationships. A product is an object. A brand is a personality. A product can be easily copied. A brand is unique. And I love that because that's particularly powerful. It talks about the essence and the importance of trust, the importance of a relationship, and more importantly, the importance of being unique. A brand is the difference between a soft drink and a Coca-Cola. There is no other difference. A brand is the difference between, yes, okay, this is a little bit old, an MP3 player and an iPod. There is no technical difference really between the two. A brand is the difference between a cup of coffee and a Starbucks. There is nothing that separates it. Typically, it's the same coffee that goes in the cup. The only other thing is the brand. A brand is not a trademark. And that's important to recognise. You can trademark a brand, but a brand in itself is not a trademark. The trademark is a legal thing, and it forms part of the brand's identity. And actually, do we know why I put Direct Line and Asda there in terms of trademarks? Any of you a bit of trademark geeks? Probably not. Just to point out that a brand goes beyond the actual physical, the design, the look. The Direct Line jingle, you know that awful thing that phone used to do in the adverts, that was trademarked. It was the first bit of, one of the first bits of musical content that was trademarked. And Asda, anyone know why that's there? Any of you old enough to remember the Asda bottom pat? That was trademarked. And it was trademarked as part of their integral part of their brand. So it's interesting how you can play with the legal aspects of your brand and the legal aspects of trademark. It is not a mission statement. This is just simply a reminder of your values. It is not a logo or slogan. That is, again, a very small part of your brand's visual identity. And it's not advertising. Again, you can advertise part of your brand, and you can communicate the message your brand creates, but advertising is not branding. I love these. These are integral brands to me, and personality brands, lifestyle brands that are really rather important, and they've changed the way that brands have been formulated over the past few years. Like human beings, all brands are born equal. The trick is the same. Prove one isn't. Prove that you are different. Branding is the art of science. It is the art and science of identifying and fulfilling human physical and emotional needs by capturing their attention, imagination, and emotion. And to me, these are two great examples of a brand that's done just that. Innocent, by the way, in their offices, they don't have carpets, they have grass. Seriously, along the corridors of their offices, they have grass instead of carpets. That's how much the brand extends. They have created something that gives us this emotional imagination connection. The art of marketing, to me, is the art of brand building, and I agree with Philip Kotler on this. Philip Kotler. If you are not a brand, you are a commodity. You are just merely selling pens, I'm pleased I didn't drop that. You are merely selling pens, then price is everything. Low cost is everything. And the lower the cost, the more you're going to win. We don't want to create that. We want to create something of greater value. We want to build a brand. Build something that's worthy. Build something that doesn't just appeal to the lowest bidder. So how do we do that? Well, in essence, there are 6 steps to the brand building process. And the first one is to really look at your long-term goals. What do you want to achieve out of your business? What do you want to create? Some people just want to dip in and go. Some people want to create something that's going to last a lifetime and potentially you can sell on to or you'll pass on to your children. We want to get a little bit of market research. We want to talk to our stakeholders. And this is stakeholders in the widest possible sense. So people that have an interest in what we're doing. It is not just your customers. We want to talk to as many people as possible about trying to extract what they want from your business. How do they want to connect emotionally and intelligently to your business? What do they really want to do? Then we want to develop who our customers are going to be. We want to develop a brand promise. What are we going to promise to our customers? How are we going to create that into a vision? And most importantly, into value. Value is everything the customer wants. So a brand has got to portray that value to customers. We develop a position within the market, and then we talk about a marketing strategy that supports the original brand promise. So step by step, what are we going to do? So what is our brand promise? What is our commitment to our customers? What are we always going to do for them? Are we always going to deliver on time? Are we always going to deliver high quality? Are we always going to use ethical and moral supplies? How do we want to be perceived? What is our brand position? How do we want people to think about our business? What is our competitive edge? What makes us different from our competitors? Our brand delivery. How are we going to deliver our commitments? How are we going to fulfill our commitments? What actions are we going to take? And most importantly, what do we want our brand to become? We have things that are influenced externally. So these are going to influence our customers, influence our stakeholders, but are going to be influenced by our customers and stakeholders. And then there are things that are set by us as the organisation. The traditional thinking around brand was to endow a product or service with unique characteristics through creative use of name, slogan, packaging, and advertising. Some of the things that I mentioned earlier. However, in a muddled world full of muddled images and messages, it's extremely difficult for a brand to rise above this noise and get noticed. Did you know you see on average 20,000 brand messages a day? 20,000 brand messages. How on earth are you going to stand out in that noise? So, just to be a bit clever, we went through a little bit of a logo and packaging exercise earlier. I'm going to do a little bit on slogans. Now, for the non-techies, I know there's particularly 2 that might pick this one up. What's that one? No, we'll come back to that one. Well, we won't, because it will say. Oh. Finally. L'Oreal. Now, the red herring here was Microsoft. You got all the others. The red herring was Microsoft. Why? Because typically, all of these other statements, all of these other slogans are related almost directly to the product. So just do it. Very famously, just go out and exercise. Just do it. Every little helps. Tesco, all about saving, all about low cost, high value. I'm loving it. Apparently all about the McDonald's experience, whether you agree with that or not. Have a break, have a Kit Kat, all about the fact that when we have a break, such as today, we have chocolate sometimes. Ultimate driving sheen, obvious. Once you pop, you can't stop. Very famous around Pringles. If you ever try a packet of Pringles, I challenge you not to eat them all once you have opened the tin. And then because you're worth it, they're trying to create, again, that higher value around L'Oreal. The one that stands out is Microsoft. Where do you want to go today? When I do this session, most people say it's a travel company. They often say people like Expedia, because it relates to travel, and I can understand why. So if we're trying to create a slogan as part of our brand, try and make sure it's not too clever, and it relates to, in some degree, the product or service you're trying to deliver. So going back to our 6 steps, what's step 1? What are our long-term goals of the organisation? What do you want to get out of it? What do you want to get out of the product or service or the organisation itself? You cannot develop a meaningful brand strategy without having a meaningful business strategy. What do you want to create? You can create a logo, a name, a tagline, and a set of graphic elements that will be really nice, but how do you know whether it's going to stand the test of time? What do you want to create out of your business? You all know the acronym SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, reliable, time and targeted. Sorry if I said that too quickly. What we want to do is instead of saying, I want to be in business, I want to stay in business, or I want to make a profit, what we're trying to do is work out some measurables. We want to know whether we've achieved those objectives when we look back over a period of time. So we try and utilise SMART in order to do so. Step 2, who are the key people that we need to win over? Who are the key people that we need to have an interest in this? Who are the people that we want to generally influence, and who are the people that we want to be influenced by? And there's this power interest matrix that's around in business academic nature, and we want to really look at those. So if we take all of the people that have an interest in our business, we can map them against this kind of 4 boxes. Any of those, it's really important that they agree with what we do. Those, yeah, kind of. Those, yes, kind of. Those, doesn't really matter. Okay, don't create something that's really out there that's going to put them off. But they don't really matter. They're the important ones. And chances are, if you're a small business, most of those will be your repeat customers at the moment, your really valuable ones. So don't create something that's going to put them off. There are lots of stories in kind of brand theory of brands going a step too far, changing too much, too quickly, too soon. And it's created a problem for the business. The biggest one was, for those old enough to remember, ever heard of a brand called Consignia? No? It was the massive mistake the Royal Mail made in the early 90s. They rebranded to something called Consignia because they wanted to extend their market reach to Europe. And the term royal wasn't necessarily a positive statement in some European countries. They had a history of chopping the heads off royals. So royal wasn't used very positively. So they tried to get rid of the royal name and extend their reach into Europe. So some clever marketing bods came up with something called Consignia, which a little bit afterwards, there was a little bit of an old wives' tale about the fact that Consignia meant late in Spanish. It doesn't, but that was the rumour that went around, and that was the tag that Consignia had. Not particularly good for a mail delivery service, the tag of late. So they dropped it, and they rebranded back to what we have now. But in essence, they didn't really do any market research to these. All they did was some clever and very expensive marketing company came up with the brand and look and feel of Consignia and didn't really do any market research in it. So it's really important that we research. And in fact, to me, one of the only real success stories of a big brand change was HSBC. When they changed from being Midland Bank to HSBC all in one go. It happened overnight, in essence, it happened overnight, and it really didn't put a lot of people off. In fact, it helped them build the business. So they did that really quite well, but there are lots of other stories where they didn't. We want to know who our potential customers are, and we've already been through that in the first session. So you'll have already seen that. And then we want to develop our core promise. What are we going to do? What are we going to deliver? How are we going to deliver it? What is our uniqueness to it? So we take Marks and Spencer's Plan A brand about the things that everything's going to be environmental. So Marks and Spencer's Plan A was all about the fact that all our logistics is going to be environmental. Our lorries are going to be designed in a specific way. We're going to deliver things in the right ethical, moral and environmental basis. So they put that Plan A brand all around that promise. Volkswagen's promise to you as potential consumers is about quality, is about reliability. And you can look at the adverts that they produce that kind of reinforce that message. So theirs is all about reliability and quality. Basically, this is where your organisation's, your business's personality comes out. What do you want it to stand for? How do you want it to look and feel? Is it going to be jovial? Is it going to be cartoon-like? Is it going to be dark and corporate and appeal to people in pinstripe suits? What is your brand going to look like? So we can talk about the personalities of these three car brands, and in essence, they're boxes on wheels again. But what differentiates them is the personality of the brand. So the personality of Volkswagen, as I've said, is reliability, is quality. Rolls-Royce, luxury, flamboyant, status. The fact that X amount of cows are peeled in order to put the leather on the seats and everything's hand-stitched and all that. And then you've got Ferrari, which is actually you've got to 50, it doesn't necessarily work, and you want another way to appeal to the ladies. No, sorry, that's very flippant. But it's a status thing again. It's fast, it's Playboy, it's that sort of thing in terms of the personality of a Ferrari and the like. Some people of car buffs will talk about the personality of Ferrari being history of sports cars and all those sorts of things. But typically, if you see someone driving a Ferrari, you probably think footballer or pop star, perhaps. So what we want to do, what is the business's raison d'etre? What is the deep need you are satisfying? What is your reason for being in terms of the business? What image do you want to project and who do you want to project it to? What is your brand aspiration? What do you want people to feel about your brand? What do you want it to? Do you want it to be something that people aspire to buying or owning? What is your USP? What is your unique selling proposition? What makes you stand out? In essence, all of that should be written into your brand's personality. And what are your core competencies? What do you do well? What is unique about what you do compared to that of your competitors? Because that should go in. These should all go into the mix of your brand's personality. So ask yourself, what do you believe is your current look and feel that you project to your customers? Ask your customers, what do you look like? What is the impression you give? How do you act? What do you actually want to project to your customers? So what is the gap? What is the difference? What is the difference between what you believe it is and what they believe it is? And I will actually, and if we've got internet, I'm going to go off on a tangent because I'm going to do this as market research. I apologise. I'm going to have a very, very blatant advert. Right, that's my business. What is the personality that comes out of that? That'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. No, go on, be honest, I don't care. Rip it to shreds. Be very complimentary about it, whatever you want it to be. That is the front page of my business's website, and I'm quite happy for you to be, sorry? Adventurous. Okay, good. Cold. Okay, no. No one's wrong in this, and I'm not going to get offended, storm out, throw my dummy out the pram and leave. That's really quite useful. So, someone, sorry?
Logo looks like I look at it, it's a construction company.
It's a construction company.
No, it seems like way up there somewhere.
Okay. So, arrogant almost.
No. Like there's a big challenge that's being faced.
Interesting and very interesting feedback, and hopefully, without being offended in any way, shape or form, it allows you to see that the gap, one person's perception or what I want to portray about my business and about my brand, a room of 10, 15 people can create 10, 15 different perceptions, and of which actually you all have. So it's really quite interesting and really quite difficult then to get right. This perception of the gap of where we were in the slide. What I want to project is necessarily a corporate image. It's not jovial, but I don't want it to be too pinstripe suits. I want to project the fact that I'm going to help you achieve things. I want to project that I can help you get over your obstacles, which is, I guess, what the lady at the front was perhaps perceiving. What you were perceiving is cold, nothing wrong, is construction, my little bit missed on that one then, and all sorts of different things. So there is a big gap. And I'm someone that talks about brands, so how have I made that mistake? Well, why? Because I haven't had the chance to talk to a lot of people like you guys about how the brand has evolved, about how the brand has been created. My brand promise is all about the fact that I'm going to offer something bespoke and unique to you to help you overcome your problems and grow your business. But that's clearly not what some of you have perceived. As someone that has a website, you have the blink of an eye to create that perception. So people have literally milliseconds to get an impression about your website, to get an impression about your business from seeing the homepage of your website. And I gave you that as a test. And I gave you that as a test, and I got instant reactions of cold, of almost arrogance of the fact that I was up there and you lot are down there. And that's bad, because that's not right. But that's the impression I'm giving away. So I've got to rethink that, and I'll quite happily take that feedback on board. But you're right. If I'm driving traffic, people will have a little bit of a brand story behind it before they see it. So, but it is important feedback. So what we've got to look at when we're building our brand is we've got to look at the difference between features and benefits. If I was buying a car, and you would buy a car, we have a cigarette lighter in a car. I don't smoke, so it's got no benefit to me whatsoever. So that's just a feature to me. It's of no relevance whatsoever. A benefit is something within that car that I'm going to actually want and use.
You use it as a charger for your mobile.
Yeah, okay. Touche. Yes, you're right, I do. But if it was renamed as a charging point, then it would, to me, it would become a benefit. As a cigarette lighter, it's just a feature. So we need to understand what we've done about our product or service, whether we've got benefits or whether we've got features. It's the benefits we really want to try and tie into our brand. The features are just irrelevant. And actually, if we work on, and one of the things that my organisation works on, is something called the aggregation of marginal gains. And what we want to try and do is look at the value that we create as a business and try and get rid of some of those features that we spend money on that people don't actually value. So we want to try, sometimes we try and unpick businesses in order to try and save them money. We say, well, actually, that's just a feature. Get rid of it. You're spending money creating that people aren't using. What we want is to have features that are benefits. So we need to understand what a feature, what's within our business is a feature, what within our business is a benefit. And we go back to this aspects again. So our core product, will have a core function associated to it. Then we can formulate it. We go out again in terms of the circles, and we have a total product, which then looks the difference between, we're getting differentiated again. We're differentiating from our competitors. We're differentiating through our features and benefits, our packaging, our branding, whatever it might be. And then we have our augmented product, which is the guarantee, things like that we can create. And the really important thing within our brand is to look at that one. If you're selling a product, if you're doing a service, what level of brand promise can you create by looking at the augmented product? So I worked with in fact I still do every now and again, a very successful company that actually worked on the Enterprise for Corby program, bit of a plug, was a men's bag company. Not briefcase, not suitcase, but a kind of man bag would be the best way to describe it. They would describe it as folio cases. Now their average cost of their case would be £300–400. So it's high quality. But they only retailed them over the web. So the big thing there was, how do we get over that quality? How do we get over the brand promise of quality via the web? People can't touch them and feel them and understand what that quality is. So part of their brand promise was their guarantee. And they offered a lifetime guarantee for their product. If it got damaged, if it fell apart, providing it wasn't misused, they would fix it or they would give you another one. That's part of their brand promise. That supports their brand promise of quality. So what can you do to do that? So brand building involves a deep understanding of both functional and emotional values. So we've got to look at the features of our products, the benefits of our products. And then we've got to look at how they're translated into emotional value. And the ability to combine them in a unique way to create the preferred augmented product. This augmented product becomes your brand. And consistency is the key. Again, if there's one thing to take away from this particular session, is consistency. Everything with your brand needs to be consistent. Whether it be the colour palettes that you choose for your brand's look and feel, your logo, your corporate design, your web design, whatever it might be. Whether it be the way that you act in front of people. Whether it be the communication, the language that you use, it has all got to be consistent. If it's not, the brand will not be created. And just to prove the power of brand, EasyJet, a few years ago, decided to take orange mobile phones to court over the use of the colour orange. EasyJet wanted to protect the colour orange and therefore took orange mobile phones to court over their use of the colour orange because they thought it was an integral part of their brand. They were always consistent. Whenever there is orange, there is EasyJet. They failed, incidentally, and cost them an absolute fortune to do so. But they wanted to protect the consistency of their brand. If I gave you the colour purple, not the book, but the colour, what brand would you associate to that?
Cadbury's.
Thank you. Because of their consistency. If I said green, in a particular shade of green, particularly relevant to Northamptonshire and involved in alcoholic drinks, you would say Carlsberg, because it's consistent. So we need to be consistent. So how are brands actually built? What do we need to do in order to do that? Well, we look at it from the position. Where are we going to position ourselves in this market? And we can relate back to this perception map. Are we going to be high price, high quality? Are we going to be low price, low quality? What position are we going to put ourselves in? Who are we going to compare ourselves with? Who are we going to position ourselves next to? Are we going to have to look at repositioning? And the best repositioning story was Lucozade. They repositioned the brand in a fantastic way. We need to consider the long-term perspective of our brand. How is it going to evolve? How is it going to grow? What can we do to modernise it at each step, to go with changes of trend? How can we deal with it internally? Most of you guys won't be relevant. Are we first? What can we create with our brand that means we're going to be first? And we're going to create this something called first mover advantage. We need to have well-blended communications. So those communications, our outward voice, our outward perception to the customer needs to be well-blended, needs to be consistent. And it needs to have the relevant quality. That may not be high quality, but it needs to have the relevant quality. Incidentally, a really good live case at the moment for repositioning is Lidl and Aldi. A few years ago, I think we'd have all perhaps put them there. No frills, low price, low quality. They are taking market share left, right and centre over the big three or big four supermarkets, Asda, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Morrison's. Why? Because they're positioning themselves to move up. All of the adverts, all of the look and feel that they're creating is trying to offer this perception of higher quality, but with the perception of competitive, not low, competitive price. So they are repositioning themselves to compete directly in the middle here with the big four. And they're doing a very, very good job at it. So quality, we need to build quality into our product. Marketing a computer that overheats or a car that breaks down is a pretty damn difficult job to do. We need to create a position, and a position relies upon these 6 points. So the brand domain, what are we, the area that we sit in, the values that we have, the reflection that we give people. What is the perception that we want to create? Linked to the personality, linked to the assets that we have. What brand assets do we have? A really good brand asset is Intel. Why? Because every time the Intel chip is advertised on the telly, whether it be Intel or not, they have to have, it's a legal requirement for any computer manufacturer to use that stupid little Intel jingle and say Intel inside. That's one hell of an asset. Every time you buy a computer with an Intel chip inside, it will be marketed that it has an Intel chip in it. It has to, because of the power of their asset. And then a heritage. What is the history behind it? What can we create? A really good, and I'm awfully inspired by this, and I was really, really privileged to go and listen to her. A woman called Jo Fairley, who developed the Green and Black's brand, the brand of chocolate that I'm sure you will have heard of. And she talked to us on the Enterprise for Corby sessions. She talked to us in complete transparency about how she created her brand, Green and Blacks, and the reasons behind it. She wanted to create a fake heritage of her brand. And she did that by using one little symbol, that ampersand, that funny little A in the middle. Because the ampersand is known to be a heritage mark. It's something that brands have that have been around for a long, long time. Look at things like Saatchi and Saatchi. They used the ampersand. So to create a heritage that wasn't there for her brand, she simply used the ampersand, which was really, really clever. Green was simply used because it was an environmental chocolate, and black was simply used because initially she was only selling dark chocolate. And that's it. That's how her brand was created. But what it did was create this wonderful brand heritage overnight. But it also created a reflection and a personality. And that, to me, was one of the most powerful brand talks that I've heard. And it was luckily via Enterprise for Corby, which was great. So brand heritage. The Heineken brand has been around as it is for a long, long, long time. It has a heritage to it. Brand reflection. Superdry. If we wear Superdry clothes, we will be the coolest and, okay, this was a few years ago, the coolest person on earth, because they wanted to reflect a certain lifestyle, a certain personality upon the people that were wearing their clothes. We've got the brand asset of Intel, and we've got the brand, a brand that's set up on values, the Volkswagen. So how are you going to create your brand? Incidentally, the business that I was talking to about the bags is simply Hold All & Co. Because they wanted to set up, again, a heritage feel about their brand. The brand promise, the brand personality was all about heritage because it wanted to appeal to a particular customer market, particular segment. So again, they utilised the ampersand. Repositioning, I love this story as a bit of a brand geek. I love this story. How Lucozade went from being the #1 medicine of a 6-year-old all the way through to now the #1 sports drinks manufacturer and reseller in the world. They've changed that. It allows an organisation to take advantage of new opportunities, and they saw a massive opportunity in the late 80s, early 90s for sports drinks. And they positioned themselves away from it, and they steered away from the threat of actually, why on earth is a heavily sugary drink good for us? It's not. Dentists would argue that. Doctors would argue that. So actually they steered away from the threat of health and positioned themselves completely in the aspects of sport, where apparently high sugar is a good thing. It's not. We have well-blended communication. We have a consistency of approach with visual image, with public relations, with descriptive text. And Andrex, I think, is a particularly good example of that. Everything they talk about is soft. And even the little puppy makes you feel that everything is warm and cosy and nice. So even the kind of brand imagery that they've created around that supports their promise. They have a well-blended communication. Marks and Spencer's, oh gosh, what a great example of a business that failed. And failed because they believed they were a pioneer brand. They were at one point. They were a pioneer brand in women's clothing. But then they became complacent. And actually, technically, it was all about what the next black would be. As females, you'll probably know that black is the next black, or brown is the next black, and blue is the next black, whatever it is. Well, they had the belief that one particular colour was going to be the next black. However, research and their competitors proved differently. And ever since then, back in the late 70s, early 80s, they've really, really struggled, and they've still not picked it up. They're trying desperately to create a more youthful audience for their brand, the Peruna and all those sorts of things that they have, and the celebrities that do it, but they're really still struggling. They're doing it because they were complacent. And likewise, Orange as well. They really struggled. They became one of the pioneer brands in mobile phones. But they really struggled because they became complacent. So whatever you do, don't be complacent about what you've got. It does not guarantee success, the fact that you're a pioneer in what you do. There are only a few businesses that have survived that first mover advantage. Apple being one of them, I would suggest. Gives you a great opportunity to develop loyalty, but don't be complacent. We need to be able to have a long-term perspective. We need to be able to develop our brand over trends. Trends change. Trends in marketing theory change. Trends in our visual and graphic feel change. And we can tell, and we use Shell as an example, that this overly complicated, more detailed logo has morphed into actually something quite simplistic and modern and crisp. And Nike have been through all sorts of iterations. They became so well known as a brand that they actually dropped the word Nike and don't often use it anymore. They just use the swoosh. So that's how their brand has evolved. Again, quite complicated. You would say actually that is quite 70s in style, the font that's used. Moving up to quite an 80s approach of being quite crisp, quite corporate, all the way through again to a quite minimalist approach, which we now have in design and in marketing appeal. So how can your brand evolve? They need to be maintained properly. They're valuable. Actually, it's one of the biggest things you can sell if you're selling a business. It's one of the biggest things that is sellable about your business. It is an asset. So brand strategies, what do we want to do? Well, we want to brand by planning, we want to brand by imagery, we want to brand by self-expression, and we can brand by customer experience. And there are some wonderful examples of each one of those 4 brand strategies. So Disney, Starbucks, all about the customer experience. Hilton Hotels, as I've already talked about. The Disney experience is, I hate that meet and greet in their stores, but it's part of their experience. It's very American, have a nice day when you leave the store. Starbucks, what a wonderful example of a brand that's created purely on customer experience. They are selling, in essence, the same coffee bean that's in that coffee jar up there and the same coffee bean that you can get at home, but actually they charge £3-4 for the privilege of it. And there's a great examples of how they've extended the Starbucks coffee brand. Did you know you can buy Starbucks music? You can download on the App Store the background music that they play in Starbucks, just to create that Starbucks experience at home. Babies screaming in the background and whatever. No, sorry. Branding by self-expression. This is all about how we feel when we put on these particular items. What they reflect upon us in terms of the look and feel. So Superdry, Apple, one of the biggest things. We got an Apple iPhone, we're therefore part of the cool lot, or whatever it might be. Swatch did a very good case of this in really ripping apart the clock and watch market. They tore apart the traditions behind it, especially in Switzerland, where they're famous for the traditional approaches for watches. But the Swatch story is certainly one to look at if you want to talk about how brands can really, really change an industry, particularly by self-expression. And Superdry did the same in retail clothing in the early 2010s. Branding by imagery. Well, all you've got to do is just look at adverts in magazines, look at fashion brands that brand by particular iconic imagery. So Calvin Klein are famous for their black and white images of models wearing a little bit of their clothes. FC UK, again, all about the imagery and the play on the term FC UK. Marlborough, the actual brand history towards the Marlborough is really based on imagery of the iconic image of the cowboy going through the desert in America. And then you've got a brand by planning. And Coca-Cola planned their brands really well. Nestle, Intel in particular, again, with their brand asset and how they've created that brand asset. So none of those are right, none of those are wrong, by the way. So you just pick your method. And it very much depends on which style of business you're offering, what you're doing. So just to give you an example, Chris, I know a little bit about your business, so you'll be branding by customer experience, I would imagine. Likewise, I guess with the Indian food, it will all be about the experience that you can create. And some visual images to go around that. So that was the kind of iconic Calvin Klein visual image. In fact, I think that's Kate Moss. So it must be quite an old photo. So branding by experience, I love the way that Marks and Spencer's brand their food. And actually, again, they've changed the way that marketing is now done in terms of food. There was a phrase created as a result of this, which was, don't just sell the sausage, sell the sizzle. So Marks and Spencer's very much don't just sell the food, they sell the experience behind it. So a couple of years ago, they ran some very, very successful TV adverts about the look and feel and what their food would do to you, in essence. So this isn't just a chocolate cake, it's a rich chocolate cake that will make you feel really indulgent, and they use some great words, and actually by the end of the advert your mouth's watering and all you want to do is go and buy a Marks and Spencer's chocolate cake. And they did that by experience. If you go back to the early 90s, the Häagen-Dazs ice cream campaigns that were actually really quite sensual, sexual. They certainly had sexual connotations to them. They create a quite iconic brand by doing that, and they've dropped that since. But I particularly like the Marks and Spencer's story, and again, that would be something that I would strongly recommend you take on. Don't just sell the sausage, sell the sizzle that goes with it. So if you're selling products, when was the last time you just bought a packet of salt and vinegar crisps? Nowadays, you buy French balsamic vinegar and Manglesey sea salt. You don't just buy salt and vinegar. They want some degree of descriptors behind it, some authenticity, some added value about the products and ingredients. We don't buy marble, we buy Italian marble. We don't buy leather, we buy Italian leather. So add those descriptors, add value. And that's branding.